Hi, boys and girls. I'm really excited to be sharing another Beatrix Potter story with you today. Now, you know how much I love bunnies and springtime and all of those things, and so I have this whole entire book full of Beatrix Potter stories. And today we're going to be reading The Tale of Benjamin Bunny. Now, if you remember on Monday, we listened to the tale of Peter Rabbit. And while Peter was stuck in Mr. McGregor's garden looking about how to get out, if you remember, he saw a cat, and it said, Peter thought it best to go away without speaking to the cat because he had heard about cats from his cousin, little Benjamin Bunny. So today, we're going to read the tale of Benjamin Bunny and see what happened with Benjamin and the cat. So, here we go. One morning, a little rabbit sat on a bank. He pricked his ears and listened to the trot of a pony. A gig was coming along the road. It was driven by Mr. McGregor, and beside him sat Mrs. McGregor in her best bonnet. As soon as they had passed, little Benjamin Bunny slid down into the road and set off, with a hop, skip, and a jump, to call upon his relations who lived in the woods at the back of Mr. McGregor's garden. That woods was full of rabbit holes, and in the neatest, sandiest hole of all lived Benjamin's aunt and his cousins, Flopsy, Mopsy, Cottontail, and Peter. Old Mrs. Rabbit was a widow. She earned her living by knitting rabbit wool mittens and muffetees. I once bought a pair at a bazaar. She also sold herbs and rosemary tea and rabbit tobacco, which is what we call lavender. Little Benjamin did not very much want to see his aunt. He came round the back of the fir tree and nearly tumbled upon the top of his cousin Peter. Peter was sitting by himself. He looked poorly, and he was dressed in a red cotton pocket handkerchief. Peter, said little Benjamin in a whisper, who has your clothes? Peter replied, the scarecrow in Mr. McGregor's garden. And he described how he had been chased about the garden and had dropped his shoes and coat. And we do remember that. That's what happened on Monday. Little Benjamin sat down beside his cousin and assured him that Mr. McGregor had gone out in the gig, and Mrs. McGregor also, and certainly for the day because she was wearing her best bonnet. Peter said he hoped it would rain. At this point, old Mrs. Rabbit's voice was heard inside the rabbit hole calling, Cottontail, Cottontail, fetch me some more chamomile. Peter said he thought he might feel better if he went for a walk. They went away hand in hand and got upon the flat top of the wall at the bottom of the woods. From here they looked down into Mr. McGregor's garden. Peter's coat and shoes were plainly to be seen upon the scarecrow, topped with an old tam-o'-shanter of Mr. McGregor's. I wonder what a tam-o'-shanter is. I wonder if we'll find out. Little Benjamin said, it spoils people's clothes to squeeze under a gate. The proper way to get in is to climb down a pear tree. Sounds like Benjamin has been here before. Peter fell down head first, but it was of no consequence as the bed below was newly raked and quite soft. It had been sown with lettuces. They left a great many odd little footmarks all over the bed, especially little Benjamin, who was wearing clogs. Little Benjamin said that the first thing to be done was to get back Peter's clothes in order that they might be able to use the pocket handkerchief. Wonder what they're going to use that for. They took them off the scarecrow. There had been rain during the night. There was water in his shoes, and the coat was somewhat shrunk. Benjamin tried on the tam-o'-shanter, but it was too big for him. Well, we can see here it looks like a little hat. Then he suggested they should fill the pocket handkerchief with onions as a little present for his aunt. Peter did not seem to be enjoying himself. He kept hearing noises. I bet he was pretty nervous to be in the garden again from the last time he had been in Mr. McGregor's garden. Benjamin, on the contrary, was perfectly at home, and he ate a lettuce leaf. He said that he was in the habit of coming to this garden with his father to get lettuces for their Sunday dinner. The name of little Benjamin's papa was Old Mr. Benjamin Bunny. The lettuces certainly were very fine. Peter did not eat anything. He said he should like to go home. Presently he dropped half the onions. Little Benjamin said that it was not possible to get back up the pear tree with a load of vegetables, so he led the way boldly towards the other end of the garden. They went along a little walk on planks under a sunny red brick wall. The mice sat on their doorsteps, cracking cherry stones. They winked at Peter Rabbit and little Benjamin Bunny. Presently, Peter let the pocket handkerchief go again. They got amongst flower pots and frames and tubs. Peter heard noises worse than ever. His eyes were as big as lollipops. He was a step or two in front of his cousin when he suddenly stopped. This is what those little rabbits saw around that corner. Little Benjamin took one look, and then, in half a minute less than no time, he hid himself and Peter and the onions underneath a large basket. You see what they saw? They saw a cat. Wonder if they're scared of cats. So they hid under that large basket. The cat got up and stretched herself and came and sniffed at the basket. Perhaps she liked the smell of onions. Anyway, she sat down on top of that basket, and she sat there for 5 hours. I cannot draw you a picture of Peter and Benjamin under the basket because it was very dark, and because the smell of onions was fearful, and it made Peter Rabbit and little Benjamin cry. The sun got around behind the wood, and it was quite late in the afternoon, but still that cat sat upon the basket. At length there was a pitter-patter, pitter-patter, and some bits of mortar fell from the wall above. The cat looked up and saw old Mr. Benjamin Bunny prancing along the top of the wall on the upper terrace. He was smoking a pipe of rabbit tobacco and had a little switch in his hand. He was looking for his son. Old Mr. Bunny had no opinion whatever of cats. He took a tremendous jump off the top of the wall and onto the top of the cat, and cuffed it off the basket and kicked it into the greenhouse, scratching off a handful of fur. The cat was too surprised to scratch back. When old Mr. Bunny had driven the cat into the greenhouse, he locked the door. Then he came back to the basket and took out his son Benjamin by the ears and gave him a pat-bow with that little switch. Then he took out his nephew Peter. He took out the handkerchief of onions and marched out of the garden. Ooh, it seems like Benjamin Bunny is in trouble. When Mr. McGregor returned about half an hour later, he observed several things which perplexed him. It looked as though some person had been walking all over the garden in a pair of clogs, only the footmarks were too small. Also, he could not understand how the cat could have managed to shut herself up inside the greenhouse, locking the door on the outside of the greenhouse. When Peter got home, his mother forgave him because she was so glad to see that he had found his shoes and coat. Cottontail and Peter folded up the pocket handkerchief, and old Mrs. Rabbit strung up the onions and hung them from the kitchen ceiling with the benches of herbs and the rabbit tobacco. The end. Seems like Peter had to go back and face his fears, and his mother forgave him this time. I want you to think about what happened in the beginning of the story, the middle of the story, and the end of the story. And I also want you to try and make some connections to Peter Rabbit, what we read on Monday. Now tomorrow, we're going to do one more thing with Peter Rabbit, and then I have a really special activity for you to do too. I'm very excited. Okay, everyone, have a great day. I love you. Bye.